Hi, good afternoon. I know I've got a couple people on the call. I usually wait until just, 2 or 3 minutes after the hour to get started. And thank you for joining. And I'll probably wind up saying this about once a minute while we have people joining. Thank you for joining. I'm going to give it just until a couple of minutes past the top of the hour to get started, just to let people trickle in, and we'll get going. And thanks again, everyone who's joined. I'm going to give it one more minute. We'll start at about 2 minutes past the top of the hour. Thank you for joining, and we'll get started soon. Okay, I'm going to get started. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Paula Paul. I'm a distinguished engineer with Greyshore Associates, and I'm really excited to have this talk with you today. Normally, I am just the webinar host for Women Who Cloud, Women Who Code Cloud. There's too many C's in that. I'm a track lead for the cloud track for Women Who Code, and I love to host these webinars. If you or others in your network are interested in doing a webinar and sharing your adventures, please let me know. I'm going to do a quick introduction on the Women Who Code mission, and then we'll get into the presentation today. So thank you. The Women Who Code mission is to inspire women to excel in technology careers. It's my own personal mission as well. And we want to see a world where women are represented at all seats at the table: technical execs, VCs, board members, and of course, software engineers, product managers, scrum masters, visionaries of all types. We do have a code of conduct, and it is published at the link that you see there on the screen. I hope that you never have to do this, but if you do encounter any situation at a Women Who Code event where you need to raise this to our attention, please contact us, and we'll make sure that we act quickly. And we do want to make sure that everyone feels safe and welcomed at Women Who Code events. It's an inclusive community. As long as you support the mission, you're welcome. All people are welcome at Women Who Code events and in the Women Who Code community. Special thanks to VMware, who has been the CloudTrack sponsor for a couple of years now. I appreciate the sponsorship. And then please connect with us on all manner of social media, repost, share what you're interested in, and definitely sign up on the Women Who Code website. All of our events are always free, and there's significant resources on the website, recorded sessions and such that can help you at any aspect of your career, coding, what have you, or in this case, the CloudTrack, all sorts of fun adventures there. So with that, I'm going to switch my hats from being the host to being the presenter. Hang on one second here. Switch to my deck and present that. And screen share again. And I think here we are. All right. So the title of the webinar today is Building a Service Delivery Ecosystem. I've had the great fortune to do this discussion a couple of times. Last year, I did it at the Grace Hopper Conference with a wonderful engineer named Rosemary Wang. And it's an interesting topic. It's been changed up a little bit here. I learned something more about this every year. I've been working in this space for quite a long time, started working with cloud over 15 years ago, believe it or not, and it just gets better and better every year. To me, it used to be delivery infrastructure, but infrastructure to me implies a physical thing. It's kind of heavy, and since I've been working with cloud for so long now, I've worked in AWS, Google, and Microsoft Azure now. It's really more of a software ecosystem than a physical infrastructure thing, so I just like the word ecosystem. But when I do work with these organizations looking to adopt cloud or even just more automation of their existing environments, they usually focus on the delivery of business capabilities in some kind of service or digital application. And if I say, well, let's look at the entire ecosystem there, you're trying to deliver some kind of business value to your customers and, either have them pay for that, get some revenue from that, or just deliver a needed public service that is your business value. And then those things are delivered through the business capabilities that you've got exposed in services and applications. And then those things in turn are delivered on some kind of delivery ecosystem. And if you think about it, even in the real world, if I want to buy a new hat, I'll go to Amazon and put it in my cart and click buy, and there's an entire ecosystem of physical infrastructure behind getting that hat to me at my address. It might be finding the right warehouse or the right supplier. Maybe things have to be put on a plane or a truck, put in a separate warehouse that's nearer to me so that that last mile delivery can get it to my house. And in addition, if you think about that in terms of the digital world, when I put my hands on a keyboard and write some code, if I commit that code to a shared repository, there's an entire ecosystem of capabilities that are behind making that application available to my customers. And it always surprises me how little thought we give that, because it's probably a significant portion of the cost of actually delivering business value. And as a developer, I do think a lot about how I get something from my keyboard to my customers. No matter what I come up with or whatever my team comes up with, we all get very excited about it. And oftentimes, the friction comes from how do we get this from, our laptops or our dev environment to our customers, whether that's consumed in the old days by, paper or terminals, and in the modern world by any number of digital devices anywhere in the world. So that's where I kind of changed this up a bit for this discussion today, because delivery ecosystems have always been around for software. Certainly, at least in my career, I wrote my first line of code when I was 16, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. It was in the 70s. I only give my age in hexadecimal now, and let's just say I'm well into my late 30s and I have to use the letters now. It's a dead giveaway. But in the old days, my first code was punched on paper tape, and I had to get in line sometimes to get to the reader, feed the tape in. The system that actually ran the program was behind some walls, like a raised floor. And then I could go to the output bins and get the fanfold green bar paper that showed the experience that I wanted to share with my friends, which was I wrote a lot of little dice games back then. So my delivery ecosystem was very structured and very routine, very safe, but it was limited. Now, if I think about my experiences past that into the days where now I could just go find somebody that got a new desktop machine, and I could take their tower and put it under my desk, and I could put some applications on that, and because we were all networked, I could make that application available to my department. And all of a sudden, because we were doing these fun things and making things available and data available to other people in the department, suddenly my customers got very dependent on that little machine under my desk. And if I went on vacation, nobody knew how it worked, and that didn't work very well. But it was really nice as a developer because that was right close to me, right under my desk, and my delivery ecosystem was completely under my control. But that doesn't go very far in terms of scale. So what we saw next was people would take those machines away from under your desk, put them in server closets, or eventually into large data centers with racks and so forth. So you see this pattern of, I have something available to me as a developer that lets me do this quickly, it scales, and then it has to have more controls. And then, of course, cloud, same thing. I do feel like this is a repeating pattern, that any number of developers can go out there and get a free subscription with an email address, and they start tinkering and doing interesting things, and all of a sudden they show their customers, and their customers want it. At the next level, you start to see what is often called cloud sprawl, or there's just too many subscriptions or too much fragmentation in the way that capabilities are delivered to customers. And then the natural outcome of that should not be putting all your existing data center processes on top of the cloud, because the cloud is completely digital, whereas a data center is physical and digital. We want to explore what it looks like to put a delivery ecosystem in place that allows the developers to safely self-service their needs as though it was a machine under their desk. So that is the concept, and actually the thing that is, that I've had the great honor to help implement in some cases. But the question always comes up is, how do you measure the value of that thing? If you're investing a lot of money to work with a team to build a delivery ecosystem, how do you measure the value? Well, my favorite way is to ask, if I were a brand new developer today in your organization, could you sit me in a conference room with nothing but a terminal and a keyboard, not even a telephone, which is the tricky part, and you can give me access to any of your systems or your wikis or readmes or what have you? How long would it take me to produce software that, given an identifier of one of your customers, like an account number or a customer ID, that if I could create an API endpoint, call it, give it that customer identifier, and it should return the payload of the customer's name, like hello, Paula. And in organizations that I've had the honor to work with, that hello customer time can take anywhere from a few weeks to several months. And to me, that is delivery ecosystem cost. It's the cost of what does it really take to put capability from a developer's keyboards into a customer's hands. And if you think about it, if I were actually going through that exercise at any one of your companies, if you sat me in that conference room, I'd have to probably go get someone and say, you know, how does this place work? What does a developer need to know? Or I might have to read a wiki. I might have to go get some kind of approval or a service ticket and say, I need to spin up a virtual machine. I might have to call the service desk. I might have to wait while things were being provisioned. Or in the end, as many developers do, sometimes they just go out and provision a cloud subscription and just say, hey, I'm just going to do it this way, which, you know, breaks down if you have to actually access existing systems where some of that information may reside. So wait time is expensive, and one of the key tenets of Agile and using Scrum or boards to measure our sprints is that we want to minimize work in progress and we want to minimize wait time. So we want to have this delivery ecosystem available to developers that has guardrails so that they consume our cloud resources efficiently and consistently, and that they don't have wait time. Sounds easy, but it's, you know, it's really an interesting odyssey. So if we want to have self-service capabilities for our developers to do delivery to cloud, we want guardrails. If you think about building anything that's digital these days, it's software driven. If you are provisioning infrastructure, it can be done with software or Terraform or scripting, what have you. So all of the nice things that we enjoy in software engineering disciplines can be applied to infrastructure as code, including a lot of the architectural principles like domain-driven design, principles like test-driven development, creating thin slices so that we don't overbuild. We only build for what's really needed. YAGNI is one of my favorites, as you're not going to need it yet. If people are saying, we've got to go out and get a big API gateway, or we've got to go out and get a service mesh, it's like, do you really need that yet? And it helps you control scope. It helps you avoid overbuilding. Development tenets like pairing and making sure that we're writing acceptance criteria on Agile stories. Those things all apply to creating a service delivery ecosystem. And likewise, if you say, well, it's all digital, you should be able to build a service delivery ecosystem and put boundaries around different products in that ecosystem, like observability or logging and monitoring. The artifact registry, identity and access is a huge one. Workload orchestration. Do you want to use Kubernetes? Do you want to use serverless? So all of these things in a delivery ecosystem can be thought of as software products. And in fact, if you look at any cloud dashboard, like this is a little strip of the Google Cloud platform, you see things separated out this way: compute, storage, networking, essentially observability with Stackdriver in Google's case. And the delivery ecosystem for your company is merely the API or the contract with your developers for how you would like them to safely consume and consistently consume those cloud products, so that they can be cost tracked, so that they can be secure, so that you don't have the rogue developer stuffing another server under their desk or another cloud subscription under their desk. If you think of it again as software, you've got products, but you've also got what I think of as user journeys. As a developer, I need a path to production. First and foremost, that's how I get something from my keyboard to my customer. Not thinking about any of the other pieces right now, maybe not even like right away about security or how I observe it and monitor it, but just what's my path to production? Where are my environments? How do I do code promotion? What are my build pipelines? Along the way, as you start to build out that path to production, you quickly realize, oh, I've put something into a higher environment like QA. Now I need to debug it. So where are my logs? How can I observe the stuff that I've deployed so that I can repair it? And then eventually, how do I get to self-repair, such as if something starts to exceed certain thresholds, you know, CPU, memory, what have you, we have auto scaling so that it's self-repairing. And then last but not least, and often overlooked, is compliance or security. how do I safely consume this? What are the security boundaries? What are the network boundaries around different environments? What are the vulnerability management pieces that I need to have in place? Have I done threat modeling? All of the things, especially if I'm in a regulatory environment, what are the things I need to make sure that things are auditable and that we're complying with regulatory concerns. So these things are still journeys that are needed just like any other software product. It's just they apply to the delivery ecosystem. And I always love the article. It's a Martin Fowler article. I think it's "You Must Be This Tall" for microservices. I also believe that you must be this tall for cloud, because if you are thinking of cloud adoption in terms of how you operate your existing data center, there's going to be, I believe, friction, because inherently when you build a data center, you have a capital planning exercise. You have to overbuild because it takes time for more capital planning around, making sure the right power is in place, the right racks and physical equipment is in place. So a capital planning exercise is very different from an agile delivery exercise where you're working with something that's an on-demand capacity. So it's a little bit different, a little bit of a different mindset, and actually all of the things about agile delivery apply to building a service delivery infrastructure or ecosystem. Investable stories, testable acceptance criteria, definition of done, all of those products and journeys that I illustrated earlier can be created through agile practices. But let's try it. I'll show you. So if I were going to think about some stories or some feature level stories, I've got the personas here. So as a developer, it's one of my favorite personas. I just want to be productive. I don't want to have to resort to putting a server under my desk or going out and getting a rogue cloud subscription, but I want to find the best way to get my work from my keyboard to my customers. And I also want it to be compliant with, my company's needs, so that I'm not wasting resources or causing unnecessary work or things that aren't aligned with the regulatory compliance goals. So let's try one. As an example, as a developer, I want to securely manage my secrets so that I can mitigate exposure to credentials. That's probably a feature level story, if you will, because that could involve anything from making sure I don't commit secrets to shared repositories. It could be ways to inject secrets into my build pipelines, and all of the things about securely managing secrets, maybe secret rotation. How do I securely manage the secrets for my APIs, all of this. So as a developer, I can express all of my delivery ecosystem needs in these agile narratives. Well, what about the people who actually build the delivery ecosystem, infrastructure engineers or DevOps engineers or whatever you would like to call them? I like delivery ecosystem engineers, but those folks just want to reclaim their nights and weekends. They are concerned with operation of the delivery ecosystem and what happens if there is an event where maybe CPU or memory goes past a certain threshold. Are they going to get an alert and have to wake up in the middle of the night? Or is the delivery ecosystem going to just auto scale and self-repair whenever possible? So this is a typical kind of operator dream, or literally, hopefully, having a dream. And a lot of the folks in this space that I talk to have a lot of anxiety around this. Does this mean I have to turn into a software engineer? Do I have to turn into some kind of Martin Fowler expert in how to do all of this stuff that you're talking about? Or do I now have to do my regular job and also all this other stuff with automation? So I would say neither. This is a journey towards this kind of approach to a delivery ecosystem, thinking about automation, experimenting with infrastructure as code. And if you think about the end goal of how quickly and seamlessly can a developer deliver this hello customer, but with the appropriate guardrails so that you can still sleep at night, that's the mindset that you want to start working towards. An example here might be build or deployment pipelines. Build pipelines apply to both applications as well as the delivery ecosystem. So as a delivery ecosystem engineer or an applications engineer, I want to deliver my application or my DE capability, my infrastructure capability, like a Redis cache or a Kubernetes cluster. I want to deliver those things in an automated way so that it is secure, compliant, and ready for my customer. So same thing, whether you're working on an application or the delivery ecosystem. This is a diagram of illustrating that the test pipeline or the test pyramid applies equally well in delivery ecosystem capabilities. You have unit tests, you builds, you have all sorts of integration testing, conformance testing that may or may not run in the same pipeline or may run asynchronously, and then promoting delivery ecosystem capabilities through environments. So it is the same process now, whether you have an application capability or a delivery ecosystem capability. So another hat as an architect. So what do architects do these days? I talk to a lot of architects. An architect should normally want to champion the architecture abilities like resilience, scalability, security, maintainability, all of the things that are cross-cutting concerns or abilities that apply across the board. And actually they apply across the board, whether it's an application capability or a technical or a delivery ecosystem capability. Let's take a look at an architecture story. Well, it's not written in story form, but you might want to say, as an architect, I want to have assurances from the build pipeline or from some other pipeline that runs frequently that we have no high vulnerabilities in any image that we deploy. Or from my build pipelines, I want to see that I have less than 1% error rate for new deployments. That's a good one. Deployment failure rate. And then auditability. We could even track that in an automated fashion, maybe somehow determining when things have been sent or notified for audit and that it's been less than 90 days since the last time an audit occurred. So there are a lot of ways that architecture concerns can also be automated. It's a larger adventure and makes for some interesting discussions. There is a really great book that talks about fitness functions that can be incorporated in a build pipeline to do this sort of thing. It's evolutionary architecture. And then there's a link on the deck here. You'll see it again. This will be recorded and shared with everybody, but there's a nice blog post by Rosemary Wang and me, yours truly, about fitness function driven development that I think is a great read for architects. And if I go back to the whole big picture with all of these different personas, the business value through that whole chain that's delivered by those applications that are delivered on that delivery ecosystem, that whole piece of the application delivery and the delivery ecosystem capabilities, that's what I think of when I think of DevOps. So one more. What does all this mean to the C-suite? So as a CX, a lot of this is a balancing act because you want to keep an eye on vendor lock-in. You know, do I go all in on one cloud and just use everything that's of that cloud? Is there a cost to that? What would happen if I had to change my mind because of, you know, price or some other reason or global reach, or you just want to do risk management and go polycloud? There's build versus buy. Do I build my Kubernetes cluster or do I use a Kubernetes as a service? All sorts of things now are coming on as services. Then you have different integration challenges there. So it's a build versus buy, it's cost. How do I manage this cloud thing as an on-demand capacity where I used to have a nice capital budget? How can I work with my finance and procurement people in an agile world? What's my regulatory compliance? And then how complex is all this at the end of the day? If I get best of breed and, you know, the highest degree of flexibility possible, it's probably going to have a higher degree of complexity. And I know that a lot of times the CXs will want metrics, and metrics can be, you know, it's what lies, damn lies, and statistics. So metrics can be the same way, and metrics can be misinterpreted, or you can often pursue metrics for metrics' sake when they may or may not be actionable. Time to hello world is a great metric, and I'm actually surprised more companies don't formally track that in some way, because every time a new developer joins an organization, you can sit them down and have them go through that exercise, and it can have measurable improvement. And if you think about the cost of that, your developers, you know, if you're a large organization, you probably have a lot of developers, and that's probably a significant cost. And a 10% improvement in time to hello world can directly translate to developer productivity and cost reductions there. So I think time to hello world is great, and that should be a mantra in a lot of organizations. There's also a lot of really interesting DevOps metrics, like the mean time to recovery, deployment failure rate we mentioned earlier. But again, it's important whenever you pursue capturing a metric that it's tied to some business value and not metrics for metrics' sake or metrics that can't be actionable. And this is my favorite slide, giving this presentation with Rosemary Wang. We came up with this one that a lot of times the four horsemen of the dev apocalypse can kind of take over, in that we're chasing metrics. And mean time to recovery is terrific. You just have to have a goal that's reasonable. And then, you know, mean time to recovery can't always be 0. Even Google doesn't have that. Deployment failure rate, also have a meaningful goal for that. That's relevant for your kind of business. Deployment frequency and lead deployment time are trickier, because are you the kind of business where you really need to commit code every day? Maybe not. It's a more of a contextual metric, and you have to put these things in the right context and not just let the four horsemen of the dev apocalypse consume you. So with all that, long story, where do we start as an organization, as an individual, if you'd like to pursue this concept of a delivery ecosystem as a conformant way for developers to get their work and your business capabilities from their keyboards into the hands of your customers, but do it consistently and efficiently and securely? Where do you start? Many organizations are already taking steps in this direction, whether it's even just pursuing cloud in the first place, or looking at more automation efforts in their existing data centers. So many organizations are on existing journeys. There are certainly product ownership questions, because a lot of times people will just say, oh, we have a bunch of applications, and then we have an infrastructure and operations team that just deal with the rest. And it's a good time to really examine, well, what is the rest? What are the products and what are the capabilities that we offer to our developers and to our operations teams, so that they can securely and resiliently give business capabilities to customers? Is it just infrastructure, or is that a new monolith? And it's really observability, build pipelines, vulnerability management, all of the different aspects of delivery ecosystems that should be managed as products. Do you have product owners over those things? Is there a skill development component? Oftentimes there is. And how do you make sure that your teams are getting skilled in a particular product area? That could be one way to avoid overload of having, you know, not everyone has to learn every aspect of every cloud. But if you have product teams, they can focus on a particular area, like observability, you know, monitoring, and so forth. Do you have executive buy-in? That's a tough one. It's, you know, again, you have to kind of build in those metrics around cost and opportunity, and really look at the entire value stream of business value through the delivery ecosystem, and not just cut it off at the application level, or you're missing an opportunity for a lot of optimization of effort, as well as increased time to market. But there's a cost to building a delivery ecosystem. So these are things that you might start thinking about as an organization. I always like to start with what is your time to hello world, and be honest about where the areas of friction are. I think a lot of organizations get surprised when you actually do a value stream map of the time to hello world, and really think about who the customers of the delivery ecosystem are. And in fact, a lot of times they are their own customers. So as an individual, it's an interesting journey as well. As an individual, if your organization is not already on this kind of a journey, or if you're an independent trying to understand this space, I would say understand who your customers are. If you're interested in serverless computing, or if you're interested in some kind of a data streaming, what kinds of people would be your customers from that capability? Who would value this? How would it help them deliver their capabilities faster? So figure out who your customers are, experiment with things that are already out there, looking around at, again, automation tooling or automation scripts, or if you're interested in infrastructure as code, understanding a little bit about Terraform and how infrastructure as code can be managed in a team setting. Read some examples, repurpose some things that are out there to solve a problem that you're already dealing with or trying to solve on your own, and join or build a community. The Women Who Code community welcomes you all and has a lot of great resources on this and many other topics. And with that, I will say thank you so much. Please feel free to follow, my ongoing adventures in this whole space. I've got lots of social media there, and please connect with us on Women Who Code. I will just take a quick peek at the Q&A just to make sure. And I think that is it. I think I have covered all of the deck here and the Q&A. Unless you want to put anything else in the chat, reach out to me. And yes, someone joined in a bit late, and this recording will be shared on the Women Who Code site. And I also post these things on LinkedIn if you want to connect with me. The most challenging part of deployment pipelines. This is a good one. Deployment pipelines are fascinating to me because actually I just had one of these discussions this week. An application deployment pipeline, we tend to think of promoting an application through environments. And there's, in this ideal world, you have continuous integration and continuous delivery. And that, if you commit some code, if for whatever reason the tests don't run, or you deploy it and the integration tests don't run, the pipeline, the build goes red, and that everybody drops everything until you fix the pipeline. So I think it's an interesting model, but not every organization can always do CI/CD. So it's all of those trade-offs of, well, if I don't do CI/CD or continuous deployment, then I need to bunch up some things and maybe have a release. And then that gets into branching, and then that gets into, well, what if I need to cherry pick something and fix or do a hot fix? So I find that end of the process the most fascinating. And then if you then say, okay, my team who's also delivering Kubernetes as a service, they have their own pipelines and their own approaches. So is it the same? And the fact of the matter is there are different needs sometimes on a delivery ecosystem pipeline than a traditional application pipeline. And then all of the dependencies. Ideally, we want to have shared nothing, but something like a Kubernetes cluster is designed to be shared by multiple applications running in different pods. So shared infrastructure or shared anything is always much more interesting and sometimes much more challenging than a single microservice that has very well-defined boundaries. I've got a couple other things here. Oh yeah, we had Rosemary is one of my dear friends and smart, wonderful engineer. Are there specific challenges or hurdles that should be kept in mind for delivery ecosystem for data and analytics and enabling data scientists and data engineers a faster time to hello world? That's an amazing question. And it was actually the most recent webinar that we had prior to this one for cloud was called data mesh, by example. And so the data mesh approach, and I'll kind of way oversimplify it here, but a data mesh approach treats data as products as well. So it's individual products that have specific needs and serve specific customers like scientists, data scientists, and engineers. And I really enjoy that approach because at the end of the day now we're seeing code is code, applications are code, infrastructure is code, and as we've talked about today, can be separated into different products, if you will, like observability or build pipelines. And I do believe that information itself is something that should be treated as a mesh of products. And in that case, in that webinar, there was a demonstration of a pipeline. So I will have to figure out how to make sure I include the link to that webinar because it was recorded as well when we publish this one out. Anything else? I hope you are all safe and healthy and remain that way. And I am very grateful to have your time today. I'll publish the link to the webinar and give you a few minutes back of your day. Thank you, everyone. Cheers.